monsters emerged from a bright flash of light in a huge crowd. Their heads, reminiscent of animals and disgusting insects, were adorned with eyes that glowed violet. 30 years have passed since these creatures appeared, but thanks to those who have acquired supernatural powers, they no longer pose a threat to humanity. All these terrible creatures were bravely fought by young people who used their abilities of various elements and directions. This gave birth to a new international sport, Hunters League, and there was a man to the sounds of a cheering crowd their applause. A guy comes onto the stage, reloading his pistol and putting on safety glasses. He prepared for battle. He was a legendary player. However, after his underwhelming performance in the summer season and after he failed to make the playoffs, all his achievements and hard work disappeared in the blink of an eye. People on the internet wrote hateful comments. It's all over with Changhyeon. He just throws money around left and right. When is he going to leave exactly? They could afford to take 2 other players above the league if they got rid of him, but Changhyeon is the only reason his team is still winning. Pro teams are not in the business of handing out privileges. They need to focus on current results rather than past results. Perhaps he deserves more respect after all. Rifle, they haven't seen this before. It's kind of wild. On the front pages of the newspaper, there were headlines called "The Fall of a Legend." Lee Changhyeon suffers another crushing defeat, and all this because of these 2 seasons. Having read all the malicious comments, he throws the phone on the floor in irritation. In a spacious room with stands decorated with golden cups, a man is sitting in a classic suit. His tired eyes look forward. Finally, he says quietly, "Changhyeon." He's sitting in the chair opposite, raises his bowed head and clarifies, "Right." The brunette notes that it looks like this season will be his last. Lee Changhyeon, startled by such words, asked again in bewilderment, "The last one?" The man explains that the president wants him to resign and focus on marketing and business. There is also the question of his compulsory military service. He already understands that he can't do this forever, right? Such words shocked Lee Changhyeon greatly, causing the only reaction he could produce to be a deep sigh. But at the same time, he thought that it would be better if they just told him to leave the team. He'd be lying if he said he never thought about leaving. He would inevitably grow old and his skills would deteriorate. But he can't believe he's being told to become the team's figurehead, especially when he single-handedly led the team to victory. Gritting his teeth angrily, Changhyeon kicked as hard as he could on the coffee table in front of him and shouted. It can't be from his blow. The piece of furniture even flew into the air, which greatly frightened the man, and he even hiccuped in surprise following this. A loud stomp was heard, and the brunette, looking at how Lee Changhyeon opened the snow-white doors worriedly, asked where he was going. Without even turning around, he answered rudely. He didn't think he should listen to him anymore. The man got angry at these words and even shouted after him, "You little idiot. He's an ungrateful freak. Does he know about this? The guy should show at least a little respect and listen when adults talk to him. That's why his image is so bad. Everyone wants him to resign. He shouldn't have gone to the trouble of raising such a worthless and ungrateful person like him." The last phrase resonated painfully in Changhyeon's heart, which is why he stopped and turned around and walked towards the brunette. The man, not expecting such a reaction, screamed in fear. What's happened?" Lee Changhyeon grabbed him tightly by the collar of his shirt and asked him, "Did he raise him? He got so comfortable here that he forgot who brought him here?" Changhyeon thought that if only he hadn't tempted him to activate his full bloom in high school. Full bloom has a C rank, plus the requirement for increasing this rank is that it increases over time. The ability of this is to awaken a person's talent. Full blossom rank increases will soon stop, but all stats will increase in proportion to the person's rank. The man, a little out of breath, insisted he was only doing what was best for him. Lee Changhyeon became even more angry after this, and abruptly threw him to the floor. The brown-haired man trembled with fear and tried to cover his head with his hands. Changhyeon, looking at him, suddenly realized that it was all because of him. But nothing will change, even if he uses violence. He feels worthless walking down a busy street. Lee Changhyeon continued to think he held so many trophies in his hands, but it all ended like this. All of his high-ranking skills and perks are extremely useful, but there is no more room for improvement. Changhyeon had his achievements. All-seeing eye levels plus magical weapon transformation level, a full blossom C plus full blossom awakened talent, legendary sniper, spatial maneuvering. But now he also realized that all he had left was an aging body and a skill that was prematurely blocked. His full bloom stops him from advancing further. If there is any point in continuing to live? Evening fell on the city, and Lee Changhyeon stood on the sidewalk waiting for the traffic light to turn green. When the right color lit up, he began to cross the road. he began to think. He wondered, was it all in vain? Does he have any reason to continue living? Suddenly, Changhyeon was blinded by the headlights of a huge truck heading straight towards him. Stopping and calmly looking the approaching mortal danger in the face, he realized that he no longer saw any point in living. On the next moment, the sound of a loud blow is heard. Lee Changhyeon, bleeding, falls on the asphalt, and random passers-by who saw this begin to scream in horror. Little by little, worried people gather around him, desperately shouting, "Someone should call an ambulance. Is this an ambulance? There was an accident here." Changhyeon, at that moment, looked at the puddle of blood that had formed right under his head and understood. No, it is not true. He wanted to keep trying just a little more, and he wanted to hear the crowd chant his name again. He wanted to give an incredible performance on this stage, which makes his heart beat faster, and he wanted to come out on top with his team, with honor. Imagining all these dreams very vividly in his head, Lee Changhyeon even shed tears. Afterwards, his eyes slowly closed, and now he realizes that this was the last thing he could remember from his past lifetime travel. All people have fantasized about this topic at least once. They always regret something, so it is typical for them to strive to return to the past. Usually, this is nothing more than a fantasy, because it is impossible. But a blue system window notifies you that the scan has been completed based on the results of the physical characteristics test. The strength remains undetermined. Reflex is 6, flexibility is 6 and 6, endurance is 6, regeneration is 5. Next he needs to press the button in the lower right corner and rise. The first thing Changhyeon sees is his hands waking up in an unknown room. The first thing he thinks about is wondering what it is. When he opened his eyes, he realized that he had returned to the day his career began. In the next room with thick, durable glass covering the entire wall and many computers, the doctor, looking at a piece of paper, noted out loud, "Okay, the results have been received. She must wait a minute." The woman he addressed and who was standing nearby obediently answered, "Of course, soon." A man with glasses and combed back dark hair, handing her documents, congratulated the woman on the fact that her son was indeed an awakened one. She took the papers and thanked him. In confusion, Lee Changhyeon, dressed in a medical shirt, turned to her with a smile, saying that everything was ready. "They can go." The woman, without taking her eyes off the documents, quietly agreed yes. Soon as they were leaving a large, multi-story building, she asked when he found out. He admitted that it wasn't really that long ago. The woman, closing her eyes insistently, noted that it was better for him not to think about something stupid. Changhyeon, walking next to him, now in ordinary clothes and putting his hands in his pockets, asked with a smile, "For example, like becoming a hunter?" She explained quite seriously that becoming a hunter is very difficult. The hunters he sees on TV are the best players in the division. There are very few of them. If he expects glory, then he better give up right now. But Lee Changhyeon smiled at her again and thought, in fact, he came from the future where he was a legendary player in the Hunter League. He would like to tell his mother that, but she won't believe him. Therefore, he promised that he would prove it to her. However, the woman just tried to hit him on the shoulder and exclaimed in displeasure. She doesn't need her son to prove anything to her. Suddenly she realized that she had missed. Then looking at Changhyeon, she wondered, did he just dodge when he suddenly stood up to run away from her? The woman added that next year he would be in high school. He should focus on his studies. Lee Changhyeon, being in a good mood, replied that she doesn't have to worry. It will be so, but she still insistently added that she was saying this seriously. He, without answering her, just thought, yes, he will prove it to his mother. They will see what the legendary hunter can do by returning to the past. Form is temporary, but class is forever. Potential to become a hunter. The awakening test uses state-of-the-art technology to analyze potential, physical performance. However, there is one thing that the test cannot measure: skills. Usually, the awakened can only guess what their skills are and how to use them. Lee Changhyeon, waking up and sitting up on a special bed, sees a bright blue color light up on his palms. Closing his eyes, he concentrates, and when he opens them, they become bright red, and a beautiful, fiery flower appears in his pupil. Well, all this does not apply to him, because he has an all-seeing eye. Crossing his legs, Changhyeon lay on the bed in his room and looked at the system window that popped up in front of him. There were 3 of his skills listed there. Skill A, Magical Weapon Transformation. Skill B, Level S, plus All-Seeing Eye, which recognizes the essence of the target. And Skill E, Full Bloom, which was not activated. He took a look at it and noted, as expected, his Full Bloom returned to rank E. Then, minimizing the system window, Lee Changhyeon calmed down. he can increase the level of his skills. He can always get his perks back. What's more important for him now is getting used to his current body and skills. Sitting down on the bed, turning towards the mirror, he rolled up the sleeve of his hoodie and tried to flex his biceps. However, Changhyeon immediately noted that this was a rather pathetic sight. He was distracted by the screen coming from the living room, which is why he says they should watch him for a year. Turning around in surprise, Lee Changhyeon said out loud, "What is this?" After that, he looked out of the room and watched as his father, turning to his mother, insisted this was their son's life. He should be allowed to do whatever he wants with it. But the woman did not agree. He is still in high school. They cannot allow him to act on his own. It would be irresponsible. He tried to convince her. That's why he says they should only give him a year. It's only 1 year. If they don't succeed, they can move on, right? The woman insisted he understands that at his age, even 1 year is important. What will he do if their son wastes his time? I am chasing a pipe dream while all his classmates will get good grades because they spent their time studying. Watching his parents argue, Changhyeon remembered. Yes, his mother was categorically against him becoming a hunter, but he can't afford to waste time arguing with her. Suddenly, the woman exclaims loudly, "So much can change in a year." Hearing this, it suddenly dawned on him that she was right. Within a year, players will be able to participate in dozens of matches. Players gain experience and improve their skills with every match in the past, and his full bloom would have been rank B if he had started a year earlier. This alone could greatly influence the course of events. Finally, taking hold of the door handle and throwing it open, Changhyeon announced that he didn't need a year. Parents should give him only 6 months. He will prove this to his mother in 6 months. The father, hearing this, smiled contentedly, but the woman was wary. Lee Changhyeon clenched his fists tightly, hitting himself on the chest, and repeated, he was serious. He will show them. Changhyeon's face showed extreme bewilderment, and he exclaimed, "What, he can't come in?" The girl at the front desk confirmed this. Minors require permission from a guardian. He asked again, did he need the guardian's signature? Did he understand her correctly? She confirmed this with a smile on her face. Yes, that's right. Heading out of the hall, Lee Changhyeon, irritated, realized that he had completely forgotten about it, because in his previous life he was an adult. He can't practice now. If he returns home, afterwards, he notes out loud if there is another way. Suddenly, someone puts a hand on his shoulder. And when he turns around, a tall blonde man in a white uniform happily greets him. They haven't seen each other for a long time. The guy asks why he is here. Lee Chung-doon turns around and remembers that it's Kim De-jun. In his previous life, he was a melee fighter who invariably received the 2nd or 3rd rank in the 1st division. He also remembers that Do-jun was on the cover of newspapers where there were interesting headlines. Are readers interested in looking into the hunter's home? What kind of hunter do they want to protect? Secrets of the popularity of hunter Kim Do-jun. Changhyeon also notes that he never took first place, but he was often compared to a top player. Frankly, it came easy to him. But of course, in this life, he shouldn't know who this guy is. So now, running his hand through his hair and feigning bewilderment on his face, Lee Changhyeon asked, is he like that? Do-jun, actively gesturing, introduced himself and noted that he was studying in a parallel class. Does this mean anything to him at school? He is known as an awakened one. However, despite this, Changhyeon sighed thoughtfully and turning away, repeated that this was the first time he had heard about him. This shocked Kim De-jun, but quickly pulling himself together, he smiled awkwardly and said that this happens. Anyway, what is he doing here? He came to the selection for the Seoul Junior Club of the Hunter Academy. Lee Changhyeon clarified that this is not the case. He wanted to use the gym, but was told he needed his parents' permission. Do-jun's eyes immediately lit up with joy, and he asked in a friendly manner, does he need help? He's a member of the Academy's junior club, so he has easy access. Changhyeon, hearing this proposal, understood that at that time he had already joined the club. However, Kim De-jun added that in return he wants to watch him train. He thought humbly, well, nothing is free. Therefore, without expressing much joy, he still agreed. Okay. Lee Chung-jun thought that this was a little annoying, but at least he didn't lose anything. After a couple of minutes, the administrator announced that everything went fine. She booked the Seoul Hunter Academy members' hall for them, with De-jun as their guardian. They can head to Hall 3. Sometime later, Changhyeon was sitting on a bench in the locker room of the gym and tying the laces on her sneakers. Kim De-jun, waiting for him, suddenly noted that he didn't think that there would be anyone at school who wanted to become a hunter. Looking up, Lee Changhyeon clarified, is he talking about him? He answered with a smile, exactly as he said earlier. He is a member of the Academy Club, but since most of the members are older than him and he doesn't know anyone, it was difficult for him to fit into the team. So why did Changhyeon come here? He also said that he would not qualify despite the name of it. No one uses this place for training. He jumping up to stretch his legs. Explained that this was most likely because everyone was preparing to join the Hunter League. After all, it's just a general training ground heading to the middle of the hall. Lee Changhyeon asked Dojin, is he sure he wants to stay? He's just going to test his skills and do some exercises, so it won't be anything exciting. But Kim Dae-jun confidently replied that, in this case, help him with his leg, since they go to the same school. After that, Chung Jae-yoon thought with irritation, even in this life, this guy is trying to attract attention to himself. Given his past life, he is decades older than this upstart. He's definitely not going to ask him for help. A couple of minutes later, Lee Changhyeon enters the training hall field as system windows appear around him. One of them announces that the setup is complete. Does he want to continue? It immediately selects the confirmation function. The next moment, a bright flash appears in front of Changhyeon. But unlike Dojin, he confidently looks forward and doesn't even try to close his eyes. Suddenly, a huge leg equipped with armor appears right in front of him, and Lee Changhyeon realizes that this is a clone of a tank, a player who distracts the enemy and prevents him from causing damage to weakly protected characters. He caused it. If he compares it to video games, he feels like the tank would be something like a training dummy. The only difference is that this is such a difficult, nasty one that it is almost impossible to come out of hiding. The tank raises his arm in the armor of a huge, translucent weapon. The system window that appears indicates that the protection for this is not defined. Kim Dae-jun, coming a little closer to Changhyeon, clarifies, did he press something in the wrong place? He needed to summon a regular clone if he wanted to train. Even in training mode, it will be extremely difficult for him to do anything at his current level. However, Lee Changhyeon, creating a spear with a blue glow in his hand, confidently asks, what is this about? Punching bags must be durable. It's hard to do anything about it, right? But Dae-jun should only speak for himself. Starting a training fight, Changhyeon wondered how he could break something hard and durable. The easiest way is to hit the target with something even stronger and harder. Obviously, he won't be able to do that now, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have other options. Having jumped into the air and examined the enemy, he understands that he needs to aim for the joints. After this, Lee Changhyeon confidently points the tip of the weapon directly at the shoulder joint, and when his spear reaches the target, bright sparks appear. The arm of the tank clone is cut off, and he, having landed, realizes with pleasure that he has excellent control of his own body, and now he needs an all-seeing eye. By activating this skill, Changhyeon scans the opponent's silhouette and notices the remaining weak spots on his body. Then standing up straight and extending his spear towards the clone, he rushes forward. Having achieved this, Lee Changhyeon immediately attacks the tank clone in the torso, arms and legs, causing it to eventually fall apart and disappear defeated. Throwing the weapon over his shoulders, he noted with pleasure that he did not expect everything to go so well. He needed to videotape it. Kim Dae-jun, who had been watching the fight all this time, exclaimed, "It can't be. It was cool. He must have set up a minimum defense for the enemy. Otherwise he would have needed a unique weapon to inflict any damage on the clone." Changhyeon, hearing such reasoning, thinks displeased Lee perhaps the guy is distorting what he saw because he thinks it doesn't make sense. After clapping his hands, Dae-jun hastens to add that Lee Changhyeon's movements were impressive. Nonetheless, he is confident that he would have been able to qualify was he trained in sword fighting or on spears. He wants to try it too before their team's training starts. Changhyeon heads towards the exit and answers indifferently. He can start, but at the same time, he confidently thinks that he doesn't need to explain anything to this guy. He will see for himself when he tries. After some time, the day comes to an end, and a starry night sets in. The sword, which seems quite heavy in the hands of Kim Dae-jun, almost falls to the floor, and he already quite tired, wonders what he is sure that Lee Changhyeon did the same thing. In front of him stood a clone of a tank, completely intact and unharmed. Having opened the system window with advanced settings, Dojin wiped drops of sweat from his face, and thought out loud. He also set the enemy's defense to a minimum. Then looking up at the clone, he wondered, so why isn't this taking any damage? Reasoning about this, Kim Dae-jun, once again, swung his sword and tried to attack the enemy. However, it managed to defend itself with a shield, and he had to grit his teeth in indignation. The round moon stood high in the sky, and warm light poured from all the windows of the multi-story building. The sounds of blows continued to be heard in the training room, and sparks flew from the clones counting. Dojin, not giving up and endlessly attacking it, wiped the sweat from his face and frowned, noting that he must have configured something incorrectly. Suddenly, someone called out to him, and turning around, he saw Brunette in the same athletic uniform, who was standing with his elbows against the wall. The guy asked in a friendly manner, "Is he not even going to greet someone who was more experienced than him?" Kim De-jung immediately bowed and politely exclaimed that he was glad to see him. The brunette, looking behind him, said, in surprise, "What? Why is he fighting a tank clone?" Dojin sheepishly scratched the back of his head and smiled awkwardly, answering that he just wanted to stretch his legs and practice a little. However, the guy leaning against the clone grinned and asked who even fights with a tank clone to warm up, then tapping Kim De-jun's forehead with his index finger. The brunette adds that he won't be able to damage this even on low settings. He shouldn't be a fool. These words hurt Dojin, but he did not become rude, but only bit his lip irritably. In the window of the train rushing across the bridge, a night city and a calm river flashed. Lee Changhyeon, standing leaning against the door and watching the view, thought he is too weak. The Universal Training Base offers basic equipment for training hunters. After De-jun left, he had the opportunity to fight the monsters he faced in the Hunter League, and use the AI hologram feature. It acts as a sparring partner. He came to the conclusion that he was too weak. His all-seeing eye is only rank B, so he can't land a powerful blow. His physical characteristics are only slightly superior to those of an ordinary person. He needs to work on his body to become stronger. At least full bloom speeds up regeneration. This he can achieve only through training, but he won't have enough time in the evening. The training room is only available to club members, and he cannot get permission from his parents. Every time he wants to train, he needs to find a place where he can train alone. Suddenly, a call from Kim De-jun appeared on Changhyun's phone screen. Picking up the phone, he said, in surprise, what he is listening. Dojin immediately asked, "Is he coming to practice?" Lee Changhyeon asked worriedly, "What happened?" However, he somehow strangely replied that he was treating me to dinner. So will Changhyeon come soon? He entered a small restaurant with a bright yellow which was called the best hangover soup. There, he was met by Kim De-jun, who, having taken one of the tables, waved his hand to him, saying that he should come here. Sitting down opposite him, Lee Changhyeon noted that he seemed to have a lot of money. Although embarrassed by them, Dojin admitted that, in fact, there are too many of them. Then pouring water into glasses, he began. They already know that it is impossible to become a hunter if a person has a poor family. Changhyeon instantly became sad and bowed his head, quietly noting that it was true. At the same time, he also realized that the awakening tests and weapons are very expensive, but even so, too much money. This guy is the same as in his previous life. He always did everything he could to be the center of attention. After adjusting the cutlery, Lee Changhyeon clarified, "So what? Why did he ask him to come?" Kim De-jun said, a little confused. "What does he mean?" Changhyeon explained with a smile that he was sure that he was not invited to dinner because he could not afford it himself. Dojin awkwardly clasped his hands together and replied that he was right. Dinner was just an excuse. He wanted to ask him something. Lee Changhyeon, raising his hand to take their order, suggested a clone of the tank. Kim De-jun agreed and said that he tried to repeat exactly after him, but nothing came of it. He was curious if he had configured anything differently. Well, he doesn't even manage to finish when suddenly his gaze meets someone, causing De-jun to lower his head in shame. Jang-gun, turning in the direction he was looking, sees three guys, and is surprised to note that they have the same shape as Kim De-jun. Are these his teammates? A tall brunette walking in front of two guys who laugh at his joke, says, as he already said, it was a monkey who beat a tank clone with a mithril sword. One of his friends clarified, maybe the guy was testing the strength of his sword. However, the brunette insisted, no, he actually tried to defeat the clone with this. He just didn't have a word. Can they understand him? It was so loud. De-jun, about whom the discussions were being held, blushed more and more with every word, almost burning with shame. The guy sitting down with his teammates at the next table continued. He asked this idiot why he was doing this. It turned out that he saw his friend do it. Maybe he should have asked if his friend shot laser beams. Another guy with short hair said it must have been funny watching two idiots do it. The young man agreed, but unfortunately, his friend was not there. Lee Changhyeon, listening to them, took a sip of water from a glass and understood everything. It turns out that this guy was disturbing Kim De-jun while he was training hard. He can't just leave it like that. So with a loud thud, he dropped the glass onto the table. He deliberately loudly addressed Dojin settings for a clone of tanks. No, he doesn't need to change anything. It's easy, if you know the trick, but it's good that he's trying to figure it out. There are a bunch of idiots who say it can't be done, but they are simply unable to do it. The brunette hearing this became angry and abruptly stood up from his seat while Changhyeon continued. Does no one at his academy know this? Did his friend pay to be accepted? However, when a large shadow loomed over them, Kim De-jun immediately asked Lee Changhyeon not to speak like that. The brunette suddenly puts one foot directly on the surface of the table, and approaching him rudely, says he must shut up. He's Changhyeon, right, who he thinks he is. Is he disrespecting an academy student? If he had struck him awake, only broken bones would have remained here. He will only give him 3 seconds. He better apologize. Lee Changhyeon calmly looked him up and down and thought mockingly, why is this guy saying that just like a movie cliché? Sighing heavily and clicking his tongue. He also noted that he was really looking forward to this free dinner. However, slowly rising under the gaze of the brunette, Changhyeon, very sharply, and with all his strength, punches him in the face, causing him to fly back. His friends, seeing this, immediately rose from their seats, exclaiming in fear, Jisoo trying to pick it up. They looked in bewilderment at Lee Changhyeon, who shook off his hand and angrily noted to himself, if someone gives him 3 seconds, this is what he will do. He never misses an opportunity to strike first. Put Jisoo on his feet. The offended shouted. He is a petty idiot. But Changhyeon, coming closer to him confidently, said the guy should listen to him. For Dojin, he may be older and more experienced, but to him, he is just a stranger, so the guy shouldn't mess with him. Jisoo, not wanting to listen to this, tried to hit him again, asked what it was. However, Lee Changhyeon easily dodged, simply tilting his head back, looked at him with crazy eyes and asked him what he said earlier. There will be little left of him if the guy hits him, that's it. What if he became so angry that the veins on his face bulged and swearing loudly? Jisoo raised his fist again to strike, but Changhyeon instantly blocked his hand and again attacked his face. And why did he even stagger? But still wiping his broken lip, Jisoo threatened now he really messed up. The next moment, Lee Changhyeon's face showed surprise, and he wondered, what is this? Can't be. Jisoo was enveloped in pink. Dreams of energy in the air around him seemed to be heating up. Changhyeon suddenly realized with horror that his all-seeing eye was warning him. A warning from this actually appears in the system window, which can calculate the risks and identify weaknesses. He jumps up sharply, creating a brighter flash of light, and screamed loudly. A small earthquake that passed through the restaurant. Lee Changhyeon had to sit down, and looking at the dent in the floor, he wondered, a gravitational attack. Is this guy really going to use this skill here? These are ordinary people here. The other 3 students of the academy at this time were taking panicking people out into the street so that they would not get hurt. Jisoo, not paying attention to them at all, extends her right hand forward and directs a stream of energy towards Changhyeon, smashing the table, chairs and dishes into pieces. He had to jump back to avoid getting hurt, and as he tried to catch his breath, he realized he wasn't going to be too hard on this guy. But having risen, he called out to him and confidently said, he will become a corpse. But Jisoo, again, accumulating energy in his hands to strike, replied that these were his words. Then he attacks Lee Changhyeon, but he manages to jump high up and landing further away. He says, irritably, it can't be. At the same time, Changhyeon is also trying to sensibly assess the situation. He can evade the guy's skill thanks to the all-seeing eye, but cannot close the distance. Well, okay. Abruptly, picking up the plate from the floor and throwing it forward, he almost hits Jisoo right in the face, but he smiles contentedly, easily, stops it, using his abilities, and throws it to the floor, breaking it into pieces. After that, laughing, Jisoo asks, did he really think that this would work against him? Suddenly, another plate rushes right into his face, from which all the contents splash out on him. Changhyeon continues to throw dishes at him, noting that Jisoo should have dodged. He begins to get nervous, while Lee Changhyeon thinks that after using a skill, a person needs to wait a while to use it again. This is called a rollback. Jisoo does not hide his confusion and shouting insults, concentrates all his strength on stopping the plates. They fall again and are shattered. But at the same time, Changhyeon calmly notes that if you use the skill without thinking about restoring it, this is what will happen. After that, he turns to him again, notes that now another plate will arrive. Suddenly, Jisoo's hands were overcome by trembling, and he realized it can't be. He can't use his skill. Therefore, the very next moment, it actually breaks on his face, and Lee Changhyeon triumphantly notes that without the ability to use the skill, the person will be completely open to the enemy's attacks. Finding himself stained with food and closing his bruised eye, Jisoo screamed. He's an idiot. He should stop with such tricks, but almost immediately, he adds with bewilderment. What? Where did this guy go? Changhyeon doesn't actually find himself in the same place where he stood a few seconds ago, and somewhere nearby, his voice suddenly rings out his head. Jisoo begins to panic and twist this in all directions, asking, what? Lee Changhyeon runs past him like a bullet, his fist straight towards his stomach. He staggers back and almost falls, reminding him what an idiot he is. He said, Head Changhyeon, out of his sight, says for the second time. Head Jisoo looks around and asks again at the same time. He also wonders where this guy will strike now again. In the stomach. After that, he tries to cover this part of his body with his hands, but Lee Changhyeon appears from behind, slapping him in the face. Jisoo, weakening, falls to the floor, and he grabbing him by the collar and continuing to strike him in the face, repeats, head, 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 head. Soon, Jisoo's face swells terribly, and he himself finds himself unconscious. Changhyeon, having calmed down and gotten up from his seat, wipes the sweat from his face, suddenly looking around at the empty and destroyed room. He wonders now what. It wasn't he who organized the pogrom, but he did strike first, and this guy is the only one lying on the ground and there are no scratches on him. Kim Dae-jun and this guy's friends are gone. What should he do? When a siren beeps from outside, Lee Changhyeon realizes it can't be, it's the police. It seems he has no other choice. Over the next couple of minutes, he pulls off something incredible, rubbing his face until red spots appear that look like abrasions. He lifts Jisoo to his knees and pours a glass of cold water over him, bringing him back to consciousness. He opens his eyes in bewilderment and says, What is this? Changhyeon doesn't answer, lies down on the floor and closes his eyes. Jisoo, finding herself on top of him, repeats in confusion, What is this? But quickly remembering what happened a couple of minutes ago, he grabs him by the collar of his clothes and swinging his arms, shouts, he's a freak, but he has to turn around when Dae-jun's concerned cry is heard nearby. Officer. He, leading a police officer into a restaurant, points his finger forward, saying, Over there. Jisoo freezes in place and then looks down where he sees Lee Changhyeon, who's now shaking. Is it from fear? No, he shouldn't hit him. The man immediately points a weapon at Jisoo, ordering him to raise his hands up and not resist. But Changhyeon, on the contrary, grins contentedly, trying not to show it to anyone. Along with this, he also understands that it seems that he managed to deceive the police with his gain, so there will be no consequences before it. Most likely, Jisoo won't tell the truth either, because he doesn't want to admit that he was beaten by a newcomer. Even if he says that he used his skill, it will still become an aggravating circumstance. Soon, in the training room, Kim Dae-jun, wiping his face with a towel after training, answers Lee Changhyeon's question. Jisoo, yes, he's had a hard time lately. He was reprimanded by other team members. There are rumors that he may be expelled. Changhyeon, listening to him mentally, notes that it seems that justice has prevailed. Suddenly, Dae-jun clarifies, isn't he going to take a break? He's setting up something in the system window. Again, creates clones of the tank, explaining that he does not have time for this. Kim Dae-jun, looking at how he picked up the spear again, just spreads his arms to the sides, and Lee Changhyeon notes to himself that his awakened talent gives him full bloom when he achieves special success. In other words, he gains a new skill. After that, pushing off the ground with his feet, he jumps up above the enemy, saying head. After that, Changhyeon stabs it right there, and the system announces that full bloom, an awakened skill, suggests that he must name all of his attacks. When he says the name of his skill or indicates the location of the strike, his power increases, but his words do not necessarily coincide with his actions. The head of the tank clone really cannot withstand the force of the blow and splits into two parts. Lee Changhyeon, examining his palms, notes that he did not expect that. What happened to Jisoo, he could read, was a special achievement, past lives. He had never seen this skill, but it's still the perfect skill to make people think he's weird. The next morning, Changhyeon had breakfast with his family. His mother clarified, is he going to try out for a survival show for hunters? He, raising the spoon to his mouth, confirmed this. Yes, they just have to watch him. He will show the two of them what he is capable of. Lee Changhyeon also notes to himself Hunters the Next Generation, a television show dedicated to finding and mentoring novice hunters. Earlier, when he went to the site, he saw that the selection had already begun and he had access to the function of filling out an application. Changhyeon was relieved to see this registration had finally opened. However, the woman warily notes, but this is a show. Won't there be too much competition? His father asks her to leave their son alone. He will never succeed unless he takes risks. she suddenly asks caustically. Is that why he ruined his business? Because you took a risk? A man is upset by such questions, and he is also angry. Does she have to remember this? Lee Changhyeon, feeling uneasy as he listened to their sport flare up, announced that if he won the competition, he would get a place in the academy or be able to join a third division team. Plus the cash prize is huge. They will even make him a custom weapon. The woman, very surprised, puts her palm to her face, agreeing, yes, they should do this, since the competition is too great. Changhyeon firmly promises that he is going to give it his all. His parents look at each other. Finally, she pushing a plate of meat towards him, agrees, okay, but if he loses, he shouldn't come to her to cry. Did he understand that? Lee Changhyeon realizes that this show is definitely fiercely competitive. After all, they choose the most promising candidate for the Hunter League from all over the country. But because of this, there are significant incentives for the best participants, even if they are not in first place. Be that as it may, they choose only the best. His mom and dad shouldn't worry. In his hands, he held a bunch of trophies he won't lose to amateurs. Already at school on the written test of Hunters the Next Generation on the third part in a 3-minute test and with clones, Changhyeon stood on the chest of defeated opponents and wiping the dripping drops of sweat from his face, smiled contentedly when it was announced that he had passed the test in a spacious, bright room, 3 people in black and green uniforms are sitting at a rectangular table. Jo Era, judge of Hunters the Next Generation, took a glass of water in her hands and turned to Lee Min-sik, who was also a judge, and asked if he once said that he had no desire to become a judge. What made him change his mind? He also, taking a sip of some water, explained that there are many things. In fact, despite his success on the international stage, he felt that he did not pay too much attention to his homeland. But he never knows for sure. Maybe there's a nugget hiding among the contestants. Min Soo-yuk, sitting at the head of the table and also a judge of Hunters the Next Generation, grimmed with crossed arms. If there was such a thing among the contestants, he would definitely already be in the pro league. The academy is always concerned about attracting new talent. Min Suk interrupted him, explaining that this was the whole problem. Does he know that these are quite eccentric people? Those who can truly succeed with the right upbringing and whom true potential is hidden. Era, resting her head on her hand, clarified displeasedly. Is he talking about these eccentrics again? These kids need someone to take care of them, not the league. Soo-yuk added that he only says that because he has never met Ethan. He really is a real talent. In response to this, Lee Min-sik replied irritably, Of course, they can do whatever they want. In any case, the vote of each of them has equal weight. A black and white ad from Hunters the Next Generation is reflected on the computer screen. Lee Changhyeon leans back in his chair despite the monitor reading the headline. They are looking for the next star to take charge of the future of the Hunter League. Yes, it sounds tempting and all, but the first stage is a written test. Seriously, one of the registration points is indeed a written test where he is asked to fill out all the fields and only then submit the document. Moving closer to the keyboard, Changhyeon begins to slowly type, and at the same time wonders his age, height, status and even affiliation with any organization. He is sure that this is the favorite part of the academy students. He finally reaches a point where he is asked to talk about his previous profession before he begins his career as a hunter. He must talk about the difficulties he faced and overcame them. Lee Changhyeon's fingers freeze over the keys, and he begins to reason that in this life, he has not yet had time to face a huge number of difficulties. The next question is just about this. In his past life, he forced his teammates to obey him against all odds. After that, Changhyeon drinks a whole glass of water in one gulp, and immediately cheerful. He understands that this is bad. He thought that he would simply participate in the competition and win it easily, but he did not expect such a setup. Having somehow completed these points, Lee Changhyeon grabs the computer mouse and loudly clicking the buttons. He understands that if there is a practical test, he will be able to catch up. Suddenly, his attention is attracted by something on the monitor, and he even bends slightly and says, "What is it?" The gray line indicates that to go to the third part, he must click on the highlighted word. Lee Changhyeon duplicates the recent question, but still moves the cursor to the required point, when suddenly, the space around him disappears and he is transported to a spacious, bright room with the same snow-white tiles on the floor. You look around, Changhyeon notes to himself. The skills of an awakened person are usually formed under the influence of his experience or unique character traits. How can someone get such a skill? Is this a teleportation skill? Illusion suddenly from somewhere in the huge cube in which Lee Changhyeon was transported? The voice of the system is heard. This part of the test includes a practical aspect. He will participate in a 3-minute test with clones. He must demonstrate his skill by defeating waves of clones within 3 minutes, and the weapon will take the form that pops up in his head. Changhyeon bit his lip and immediately thought, a weapon. The next moment, a grin flashed across his face, and 2 pistols appeared in his hands, holding their trunks tighter. He headed forward thinking practical test he's in. Suddenly, Lee Changhyeon stopped, and after taking a closer look at the weapons, he noted that he chose a pair of pistols, which he often used with the magical transformation of weapons, but other skills did not work. Finally, the system announced that the test was starting. He had to get ready. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. He can start. After such a signal, 3 large mannequins appeared in front of him. Changhyeon saw them and thought that they didn't seem to have as good a defense as a clone tank. Putting his pistols forward, he opened fire on his opponents confidently, thinking that he would pass this test as quick as he could. Jua Era's palm landed on the table with a loud sound, and she exclaimed, "Are they kidding me?" Su Yuk, not thinking that this is some kind of mistake, he watching Lee Changhyeon through the screen with her, agreed. Yes, this could be considered a little problematic. They didn't mean it when they prepared the tests. Anyone could destroy these clones if the test subject was given a gun. This is cheating. Era continued picking up the tablet. Not to mention they should look at this application. This is unacceptable. She actually opened the document that Changhyeon filled out earlier and showed him his answers to the questions in the first question where he was asked to talk about difficulties. He wrote that he is now a student. His life all this time was running quite smoothly, so he did not encounter any difficulties. In the second question, where he was asked to talk about the difficulties he faced in the group, Lee Chung-jun wrote that he forces everyone to follow his orders, so that there are not many conflicts. Throwing the gadget on the table, she continued to be indignant. This guy doesn't take this seriously. Don't they see the problem with these answers? Lee Min-sik, remaining calm, noted with a slight smile that she was right about something. Era hastened to say that this was exactly so. However, he picked up the remote control and changed the camera for viewing, adding in the end, pistols are not exactly suitable weapons for hunters. They are almost impossible to use in the league and are also difficult to use against monsters. As soon as the weapon is separated from the awakened person's body, the mana contained in it dissipates. This means that in order to use a firearm, an awakened one must imbue each bullet with mana. This is an incredibly difficult task. Besides, it is difficult to store a lot of mana in them, so most people use swords or polearms. Sometimes ranged weapons can be seen, but only with a low rate of fire, such as beams or crossbows. Min-sik mentally added that releasing a volley of bullets with a huge amount of mana, only someone like Ethan is capable of this. Finally, awkwardly shaking the back of his head and pointing his finger at the screen, Lee Min-seok admitted that this guy interested him. Jo Era immediately called out to him, when suddenly Min-soo Hyak agreed that he also had such thoughts. This completely angered her, and she screamed again, and so did he. But he explained she could argue that the candidate had demonstrated extreme insight in finding a loophole in the rules. Whether intentional or not, the end result was what really mattered. Min-sik immediately supported him. Yes, he's right. Moreover, this is not the last qualifying stage. They can always disqualify that candidate later if he doesn't meet their standards. But it seems to him that this guy looks at weapons differently than they do. Era sitting down and calming down a little clarified, like for example, he leaned his body forward a little and smiled awkwardly and noted who knows? At the same time, Lee Min-seok thought to himself that perhaps this guy believes that pistols are effective weapons in the Hunters League. But shaking his head with his eyes closed, he still came to the conclusion, no, this is impossible. But as soon as Min-sik opened his eyes, the image on the screen immediately attracted him. After pressing one of the buttons on the remote, he took one of the weapons from Lee Changhyeon, saying, maybe they should try letting him use only one gun this time. Contentedly, closing his eyes again, he thought, hopefully, this guy must prove that he is wrong. A man's voice was heard in a small but bright office. So what happened to Jisoo? Kim De-jun, who was sitting on the chair opposite, confirmed this with a smile. Yes, fortunately, his friend was not seriously injured. A middle-aged brunette in a blue shirt and black trousers thought about it, sighed. This is strange. Jisoo may not be as strong in hand-to-hand combat, but his skill is still incredibly great. Wasn't that guy hurt too bad? But he was beaten to a pulp. Finally, putting his hands in his pockets and leaning back in his chair, the man announced, okay, what's done is done. They should talk about him. has Dejun already applied for the Hunter League rookie show? He immediately perked up and exclaimed. He wanted to tell the coach, because he would be busy filming for some time. The brunette, leaning forward again, asked, so the guy who fought with Jisoo was Changhyeon, right? Will he participate too? Kim Dejun thoughtfully rubbed his chin and admitted that he didn't know this. He will ask him when they meet. Then the man noted. Good. He is sure that Dejun is busy preparing for the day. It's time for him. He, rising from his seat, answered amiably yes before leaving the office. He also bowed, saying goodbye. The coach smiled after him, nodded his head and said, yes, yeah. As soon as the door slams, the man, tapping his fingers on the table, thinks the situation takes an interesting turn. Kim Dejun, walking along the corridor, suddenly saw Jisoo behind the glass door, on whose face there were still abrasions. How at that moment, the man thought about him that he was also going to take part in the show. He would like to see it as soon as possible. The main stadium of Hunters the Next Generation lies under the blue sky and bright rays of the sun. Lee Changhyeon, dressed in uniform, stopped nearby and, looking around the stadium from the side with a warm smile, thought it had been a long time since he had been here. This is the place where he began his journey. After that, he confidently goes forward, finding himself almost the only person in the empty square. The Hunter League is divided into 3 divisions. The first division takes place inside the tower. The second and third take place in a virtual reality stadium. He used to wonder why these stadiums were so big. Almost no one uses them, don't seem to be needed for cases like this. The stands were completely filled with spectators. Among them, Sat Yoon, Hang Gyo, Yu Hyaju, Jang Min Sung, all of them were finalists of Hunters the Next Generation. As he walked up the stairs, Changhyeon thought this show took place long before his debut, so he didn't expect to see familiar faces, but there are actually quite a few of them, like several promising characters. I wonder who will win this time. It will be him. He is pulled out of his thoughts by the voice of Kim Dejun, who waves his hand widely and beckons him, sitting down in an empty seat next to him. Lee Changhyeon politely asks how he is doing. He replies with a good-natured smile that everything is fine with him. What about him? He had a feeling that Changhyeon would be in the hospital for a while. He just smiles in response to this, but at the same time, he thinks that for Dejun, it probably looked like he had received a rather serious injury. Suddenly, he leans closer and whispers in Lee Changhyeon's ear that Jisoo was given probation. It will take him 3 weeks to fully recover. Having heard this, he asks again, in surprise, 3 weeks? Changhyeon, looking down at the guy in the hood, and realizing that it was Jisoo, clarifies how he ended up here. Kim Dejun explains that he has no choice. Pro teams are looking for talent among academy students, so he has to impress them. Finally, all the television cameras rush towards the stage, onto which a white fog descends with a loud hiss. A platform appears from under the floor with a presenter who gives a welcoming speech. They always need new players and new faces who will shape the future of the Hunter League. He is glad to welcome everyone to Hunters, the Next Generation. The birth of a legend begins right now. The next moment, the lights in the stadium turn off and the stage is illuminated by many spotlights. In addition, the audience rejoices and rushes to take out their gadgets in order to also capture everything that is happening. Then the scene transforms and virtual walls appear, gathering into a huge tower. The man continues his speech all this time. He is glad to welcome everyone to the most spectacular show in the world, where they will meet the greatest hunters of the next generation. Everyone who is here today has eclipsed the countless awakened ones across the country. The competition for a place in the final was 1 to 43, and 5. Now it is necessary to greet with thunderous applause those who will represent the new era of Korean hunters. As people fill the hall with many blows and joyful shouts, the host notes that now he would like to introduce their 3 judges. Jo Era, the leader of the Korean Hunter League, who has 3 victories in the National League, Korea's best athlete on the world stage, 2nd place in the World Hunter League. Lee Min-sik, Min So-hak, an outstanding figure among the players of the Korean national team. After such an announcement, discussions begin among the audience. What is this really? Min-sik, they thought he was busy competing in a foreign league. Lee Changhyeon is also thinking at this moment. These are quite big names. They are on the same level as who he was before, although he doesn't think he would lose to any of them. The man, after giving the audience a short pause, continues. Their competitors will perform the tasks assigned by these judges, and the person who takes first place will receive 500 million won and a weapon custom made in the Mora's workshop. Changhyeon. Hearing this repeats in shock workshop. Moras. The workshop's regular products cost hundreds of millions of won, but the custom-made weapons are reserved only for those deemed worthy. He can't believe they're giving it away as a prize. Perhaps he will reach the same level of power as in his previous life. Much earlier, Era finally takes the microphone and also announces that she now talk about the first task. The 100 hunters gathered here beat out 350 other candidates. However, there are still too many of them. They need a real hunter. So the first task will be a survival game. The action will take place in a dungeon where real hunters once fought. They must hold out until only 20 participants remain in the lands of lost souls. In addition, the top 5 participants with the most points will receive an advantage in the next stage. And now they can start. People present in the stands immediately evaporate and are transferred to virtual reality. And while it's Lee Changhyeon's turn with Kim Dae-jun, he realizes with pleasure that it's finally starting. Just a few moments later, he finds himself in a small clearing among the lush green trees. Looking around, he understands that this is the land of lost souls. In his previous life, this place was used to hold the finals. He knows this place like the back of his hand. The dungeon layout, the core mechanics, the ecology, even the secret dungeon. Smiling slyly, Changhyeon contemplates a small waterfall with crystal clear water for a couple of minutes, and wonders, well, how can he do this at the same time? The stage of the game, the survival game, is reflected on the big screen. Shua Era, sitting at the table with a satisfied expression on his face, mentally notes that this guy will not be able to exploit the loopholes there. He managed to pass the qualifying stage without even demonstrating the proper skill. She could argue that it was evidence of his high intelligence, but she wouldn't buy it. Frowning, Era understands that the survival game can evaluate the basic skills of a hunter: combat prowess, adaptability, exploration, and survival skills. The fake won't stand a chance. This guy shouldn't underestimate the Hunter League. Min Soo-hyuk, on the contrary, remains calm and talks to Min Suk. The overall level of skill of these participants is very impressive. He immediately agrees. Right? Is this a survival game? Looks like Joe Era has something interesting in store. This is a great way to get rid of hunters who lack experience or skills. Suddenly, her loud voice is heard. Stop. There seems to be a problem. One of the participants leaves the task area on the map of the area in a large circle, circled with a red dotted line. A small green dot actually appears that crosses this border. Min Soo-hyuk gets up from his seat in surprise, ordering him to show them what's going on there. At the same time, Lee Changhyeon finds himself near a large stone gate with a seal and smiles slyly. The camera shows his location, and Joy Era is shocked and wondering how he knew about this place. And here is hidden an artifact from the lands of lost souls. An artifact is a treasure hidden in dungeons that come in many different forms. Sometimes it is enough for a person to simply receive an artifact for victory to be guaranteed. This dungeon has not yet been used for a quest, so no one should know about it. Even first division players, not to mention ordinary people. This guy shouldn't know about this place. Lee Min-sik, turning to her, clarifies in a whisper. Does she know what's going on? If it was a mistake, then they needed to figure it out. So she had to tell them now. Era, frowning and sighing heavily, admits that this is not a mistake. This virtual reality is created in the image of a real dungeon, and Changhyeon is now accessing the hidden area. No one knows about this, not even the Hunter League players. That's why it's not on the map. He clarifies, so she's claiming that the virtual reality has replicated the existing dungeon, including the hidden area of it. That the participant is now entering what's in the hidden dungeon? She paused and gathered her strength, answering, Ether. The artifact is so powerful that it is even banned in the Hunter League. Min-sik and Soo-hyuk are at a loss from such information and immediately wonder if they can remove this. Jewel Era explains that they can only do this by stopping the match. It's truly virtual reality, so he won't be able to bring it into the real world, but he will be able to use it in this match. Then Lee Min-suk points out, okay, but such a powerful artifact must have a guardian, right? Guardians are monsters that protect artifacts. The more powerful the artifact, the stronger the guardian. Remembering this, she immediately cheers up, exclaiming, he's right, she should check it out. In the dungeon, with a path of hieroglyphs leading straight to the center under the lonely rays of the sun penetrating inside, there is a cube, the guardian of the ether. Lee Changhyeon turns the mechanism on the stone door, and when it opens, he is relieved that his memories were finally a little foggy. Still, it took a lot of time, but he found the right place. If he defeats the Guardian and gets the ether, then winning this round will be a piece of cake for him. He boldly heads into the depths of the dungeon, and when he reaches the cube, he suddenly stops. It immediately attacks him with an energy beam, but Changhyeon quickly runs to the side and notes, contentedly, that he could have died if he had not encountered this before. This cube was identified as a transmitting technological relic discovered in the ruins of the tower. He overcame it in the finals to gain ether and seal the victory. Since he discovered it in the middle of the match, he was able to take advantage of it even though it was prohibited. Then, heading closer to the cube, Lee Changhyeon creates a sword in his hands which has a hook at the end like a crowbar. The system explains that this is a magical weapon transformation skill with which he can shape the weapon into any shape he wishes. Looking at the enemy again, he mentally assumes that the same will happen this time. After that, running and jumping up, Changhyeon clings to one of the parts of the cube with his weapon, tearing it off. Grabbing it in the air and turning over, he lands. But even as he falls, he clutches the piece tightly and notes that there is one piece. A monster-type guardian would be difficult to defeat with its current stats, but the cube is a machine that was designed to guard ancient relics. As long as he knows how it attacks, he can handle it. The cube actually changes shape at this time and gathers into two palms, which sharply collapse, trying to crush Lee Changhyeon. However, he dodges in time, realizing that now it will do it. Wiping the sweat from his brow, he also adds that it was close, even though he knew it, but he didn't miss his chance from the palms, which just a couple of minutes ago were one cube. Rays of light burst out, and it explodes, breaking into small pieces. Changhyeon remembers right before dodging this one's attack, he threw the broken piece between those hands. No matter how durable it is, this part is no less durable. He then picks up one of his opponent's pieces from the ground, which now does not glow with a blue glow at all, but looks more like an ordinary gray stone. Putting that aside, Lee Changhyeon moves on, saying out loud, "Okay, it's time for him to take the broadcast." Soon, he finds himself in a cave with a golden platform in the middle of which, between two similar golden pillars, a chest rises on a stand. A warm glow emanates from him as from everything around him. Changhyeon walks up to it, and opening the lid, says that it's been a long time since he last saw it. Even if this broadcast is not real, inside, he sees a blue energy whirlpool and understands that everything is going according to plan. Taking this artifact in his hands, Lee Changhyeon notes that he will install it on his weapon. Suddenly, something distracts him, and he hits his head under it and says, "What is this?" But the very next moment, smiling, Changhyeon wonders, is this what he is thinking about? Defeating the Guardian is considered a special achievement. He received another skill. The system window right in front of him actually indicates the full flowering of the awakened talent, the ether. He can use his mana to create an exact copy of the ether. Having read the information, Lee Changhyeon understands that he is very lucky. Well, he should test it. Having created a pistol, he uses the skill of magically transforming weapons, and immediately shoots it at a stone wall, leaving smoking craters there. Happy with the result, Changhyeon confidently realizes that perhaps with this, he will be able to use his guns sooner than he thought. The reason he was able to use firearms in past lives was because of his extremely large mana reserves, which allowed him to fire bullets created for mana. Now, the system showed that the full bloom skill was not activated. As long as it is not activated, it will accelerate the growth of the awakened one. Lee Changhyeon really understood that he hadn't activated his full blossom yet, so he didn't have as much mana as before. However, he may be able to pull it off using ether. Getting closer to the holes created by his shots, Changhyeon ether is good enough for suppressing fire, but with this, it will be difficult for him to hit the target. However, it can work with it. His satisfied smile is reflected on the big screen, and all three judges, having watched what happened, find themselves in a stupor. Joie Aura, in confusion, puts his hand to his mouth and says it can't be he picked up the pistol again. Is this how he's going to use the ether? Min-sik, who is also trying to collect his thoughts, asks her to wait. How did this guy even avoid that laser blast? He wants to know it too. The cube is not a living creature, so it seems to him that the participant is acting according to a certain pattern. But what are the chances that he knows about it? She noted that this was impossible for pro hunters like them, but the participant would have no way of knowing about it, and it seems likely that this guy has a clairvoyant skill that can predict his opponent's actions. But closing his eyes, Era still thinks hard, putting this aside. How did he think of overcoming this with the help of this piece of cube? Frowning, she remembers how Lee Min-sik said earlier that the whole problem is that eccentric people can actually succeed with the right upbringing. They have true potential hidden within them. This angers her, causing her to grind her teeth. At this time, the competition continued in the dungeon. Yoon Hongul jumps from one branch of a tall tree to another at high speed, as if going down a ladder. Suddenly, something in the air attracts his attention. Raising his head, he sees a ranking where he is in first place, and he already has 17 kills. In second place is Yu Hyaju, who made 10 kills. In third place is Han Jisoo with 8 kills. Also in third place is Jin Han with the same number of kills. And in fifth place is Kim Jin-sung, who made 7 kills. Hongul notes as he continues on his way. Great, everything is going as predicted by the members of the first team of the Seoul Private Academy. With 60 drops, this round should end soon. He finally reaches the ground and suddenly, seriously notes that there seems to be no one who can best him in a one-on-one fight. But the next moment, loud explosions are heard, causing Yoon Han-zail to wonder, is this shooting? Lee Changhyeon, having already managed to get out of the dungeon and passing through the tall thickets of grass, thinks, did he stay too long? 60 people have already dropped out, but he simply cannot find everyone. He would have been happy to take at least 5th place. He just needs to try to kill as many as possible. Suddenly, he stops and wonders, what? Is this Jisoo in front of him, hiding in the tall grass? He really sits and peers into the distance. A guy comes out into a forest clearing and heads past without noticing them. Suddenly Han Jisoo clenches his fist tightly, when suddenly the guy falls into his trap, and right where he stopped, an explosion occurs, and the brunette is killed, leaving behind only a deep crater. Jisoo comes out of hiding, whistling a cheerful tune, but Lee Changhyeon also makes himself known, patting him on the shoulder and mockingly saying, "How are you doing with the prankster?" Han Jisoo is horrified by such a surprise and falling to the ground. He backs away, exclaiming, "It's him." Chang Jae-yoon slowly leans towards his face, explaining with a smile that he had a little problem here. He hoped that the prankster would help him solve it, but Jisoo immediately jumps to his feet, screaming, "Is he kidding me? He is a freak who will now be a corpse." Lee Changhyeon immediately frowns with displeasure, asking what he called him. Afterwards, again, placing his hand on Han Jisoo's shoulder, he repeats he came here to ask him for help. Doesn't he think he's being a little rude? But he just grins, and concentrating energy in his hand, throws it back. Changhyeon lands on his feet completely calmly, despite the new crater in the ground next to him, realizing that if he forced this guy to use this skill over a large area, but with reduced power, then he could sneak up and take all the kills for himself. Although Jisoo doesn't look like he's going to help him, it's okay. It will make him change his mind. After that, he jumps up sharply, and his head exclaims. Han Jisoo doesn't have time to understand anything. He just says in confusion, what followed by a series of blows, which Lee Changhyeon accompanies with the words, "Head, stomach, head." Jisoo finally can't stand it anymore and asks him to stop. Stop. There are bruises and abrasions on his face again, and the snow falls to the ground exhaustedly, asking what he wants. Changhyeon announces that they should work together. This makes Han Jisoo puzzled, and he even asks again what to work together. He doesn't want to have anything to do with him. Then Lee Changhyeon creates a weapon in his hand, cheerfully, clarifying what, how's that? He then immediately points the gun at Jisoo's feet, but it fires into the ground, scaring him greatly. Immediately afterwards, Changhyeon presents the weapon to his temple, noting if he will have to get rid of it or he can help him and stay alive. Han Jisoo freezes in place for several moments, considering the proposal, and gritting his teeth sadly, asks what he wants from him. Lee Changhyeon, hearing this, smiles and understands he was caught. Soon, the sounds of ringing blows are heard in the green forest. Jisoo fights with the green-haired girl, while Changhyeon watches from behind. Han Jisoo sharply gathers strength into his fist and hits the ground, knocking the girl screaming in confusion to the ground. At the same time, he himself says, displeasedly, "What is this?" The next moment, Lee Changhyeon fires his gun twice, happily declaring a double murder. This is great, but Jisoo is behind him on the contrary, thinking with displeasure how tired he is of him. But just as they wanted to continue their path, someone's steps were heard behind them, and a sharp sword blade rushed at them. Jisoo, along with Changhyeon, turns around in time, manages to use his gravity skill and prevents the attack, stopping the sword. Lee Changhyeon smiles contentedly, and notes that it seems that the sound of the shooting was too loud. They attracted many guests. 4 participants, led by Yen Hanggu, actually emerge from the thicket of the forest. Some time ago, Lee Min-suk, carefully observing what was happening in the dungeon, reasoned that the Hunter League is a team sport. Naturally, not every coffin is suitable for attack. Despite Han Jisoo ranking 3rd with 8 kills, gravity is the most effective support skill on the battlefield. Repeating his name out loud, he clarified with the others, "This guy is doing well, but will he ultimately become a victim of Lee Changyun? He doesn't think so." However, Zhang Era, crossing his arms over his chest confidently, says he would have already fired if he wanted to eliminate the enemy. Seeing that Changhyeon is standing with a gun pointed at Jisoo, she assumes it seems that they are talking about something. He wants to use Han Jisoo as a support player whose role is to help key players. Min-sik agrees, perhaps, but how did he find the right person for this task? It doesn't seem like they met beforehand. Suddenly, he wonders if this guy has a skill that can detect the skills of others. No, he just seems to think about it too much. Finally, the voice of Soo-yuk is heard, who admits that it seems to him that they would make a great duet. Jisoo can hold back enemies with gravity while Lee Changyun destroys them with his ether gun. In words, it sounds very good. Lee Min-sik smiles slyly and says that he wouldn't be so sure about it. It didn't look like this guy's opponent would be that easy to defeat. The 4 of them move closer and Hangyo brings the sword back, causing it to levitate nearby. Changhyeon frowns and wonders, what is the easiest way to win in a fight? Powerful weapon tactics, good team composition? No, the simplest and most effective way is to outnumber the enemy. He has Jisoo on his side, who can use gravity, but he's just a support. No matter hard they try, they are unlikely to be able to defeat the others. That's probably what they think. Suddenly, a sword flies towards him, but Lee Changhyeon has time to react, and jumping high into the air, says he hasn't felt this for a long time. This is the guy's first time, right? Yoon Hangyo returns the weapon to himself and replies that he doesn't know what the guy did, but a rather unusual weapon fell into his hands. He will simply destroy it. No offense with these words. He points the blade at Changhyeon again, and he shoots back, thinking, this is great. In his previous life, Hangyo could control multiple telekinesis, but now he can't do that. It will be difficult for him to defend himself against many bullets. Indeed, he has to hide behind a tree trunk to avoid them. And while Han Jisoo runs away, Lee Changhyeon, on the contrary, triumphantly notes that Yoon Hongul immediately disappeared behind a tree. Unlike his previous life, is he using strategy now? Suddenly, another sword blade flashes right above him, and Changhyeon has to quickly react by leaning back, hitting the attacker's hands and knocking the weapon out of them. He notes that, on the other hand, he still has a lot to learn. If he gets that close to an enemy with a pistol, his chances of missing are 0. After this, Lee Changhyeon also rushes into the thicket of the forest, but the sword follows him exactly. Then he activates the all-seeing eye, and discovering the silhouettes of the other participants, he understands that he will remove them, while Hongul defends himself. Then pushing off from a stone covered with moss, the heir jumps up and aims at the confused guy, realizing that he is now dead. After that, Changhyeon notices a girl with a bow in the opposite direction, who doesn't even have time to hide before he leaves the gun on her and repeats she's dead. Landing, Lee Changhyeon states, 7 murders. Finally, he moves his hand with the weapon to the side, realizing that there is still the last one left, pulling the trigger and imbuing the bullet with mana. Changhyeon hits it directly into the blade of the sword, knocking it to the ground. Yoon Hangyo, who had already managed to get to him, clicks his tongue and returns the weapon back to himself. And Lee Changhyeon thinks that he will be the last victim. Then deftly turning the pistols in his hands, he puts them forward and opens continuous fire. Hongul uses swords to deflect attacks, but Changhyeon, being more experienced, realizes that his ability to deflect every shot is incredible, even if he takes into account that his bullets travel slowly due to his low mana reserve. But unfortunately for him, he is better. Yoon Hangyo quickly tries to wield a blade and sword so as not to drop out of the competition, and Lee Changyun doesn't even think about stopping continuously pulling the trigger. Suddenly, one of the bullets bounces off the blade of the sword, changes its trajectory, and then he turns his attention to it. Changhyeon fires the gun again, pulls his hand to the side so that another bullet comes into contact with the previous one, and flies around. Hangyo from the side. Lee Changhyeon immediately understands that he got him. A sharp beep is heard, and the system announces that 20 survivors will now be provided. This is the end of the survival game. Changhyeon returning again, and together with the remaining participants to the arena, thinks displeasingly he would have gotten them all. He was just unlucky. Before the judges begin their speech, there is applause from the audience, and only then does young Era begin. she asks everyone else to accept their congratulations. Each of the participants has earned the right to consider themselves a real hunter. When she considers that hunters are a tiny fraction of the awakened, it is truly amazing. Lee Ninsiak continues with a smile. What is the main goal of the hunter? Some might say, winning matches. However, they need people like the first generation of hunters who defended humanity and always fought on the front lines, going down into the dungeons. He believes that the survival game gave them an idea of what it means to be a hunter. Details of their next assignment will be revealed on this very spot next week. He's confident that all the survivors have realized their shortcomings in today's game, so they should use the coming week to improve. They are free to use the gym as much as they want, so it is highly recommended to visit it at least once. He wishes them all good luck. Then the screen on which their image was displayed goes out and only the final rating appears. This makes Lee Changhyeon angry, and he clenches his jaw in displeasure. In the ranking, the first, second and 2 of 3 places are occupied by the same participants, but Lee Changhyeon is now in 5th place with 7 kills. He sighs when he sees this, and thinks to himself, it looks like he still took 5th place. Suddenly, a system window appears at the bottom, which he pays attention to. It notifies him that the task has been completed. Awakened talent is in full bloom. The ether is open. He can now use his mana to create an exact copy of the ether. He doesn't have time to properly rejoice when suddenly Kim Dae-jun lands on his shoulder and exclaims joyfully when he heard that Changhyeon took 5th place. He turns around and asks with a smile, what about him? Did he succeed? Dae-jun confirms this. Yes, he did it too. Did he actually use a gun? That's all everyone talks about. How did he even manage to get his hands on this? Lee Changhyeon only cryptically replies that he has found one way. Kim Dae-jun doesn't insist and changes the subject. Okay, naturally, but somehow he found it. But how did he even get the gun to fire? Changhyeon doesn't even have time to answer when suddenly someone calls out to him. When he turns around, the unknown person tells him to get ready for the interview. Soon, the interviewer, taking a place next to the camera, finds himself opposite him. Lee Changhyeon sits against a green background, looking around in confusion, asking where to look. The man replies that he can look directly at him. Then he adds, great. The first question is why he decided to come to Hunters. The next generation. Changhyeon looks up at the ceiling, replying, he thought there was no better candidate than him. Then the interior notes exactly. I almost forgot to congratulate him. Congratulates him on making it to the finals. Could he share his thoughts on the first stage? Lee Changhyeon openly says that everything could have turned out better, but he passed the test as he should have. The man elaborates. He must have faced many of his opponents during the match. Did anyone seem like a worthy opponent to him? He answers without hesitation. No. After waiting a short pause, Changhyeon adds no one. At the same time, he realizes that he is worried about Hangul, but he would not call him his rival. The man hums thoughtfully and asks the question again. In this case, how did it happen that he only took 5th place? Lee Changhyeon says it boldly, but with complete confidence, because it won't be interesting if he takes the lead from the very beginning of the show. This answer makes the operator freeze in bewilderment and think this guy is just something, but he remains calm, or smiling a little more, continues. He understood everything. Then the next question. There are quite a few people in the large dining room filled with the smells of delicious food. Kim Dae-jun sits at one of the tables, rests his head on his palm and sighs heavily. Changhyeon freezes with a spoon of rice near his mouth. I ask in surprise, what's the matter? He explains the interview. It was so painful to answer their questions. Lee Changhyeon wonders what they asked him. Dojin, picking at a bowl of soup, says that they were trying to compare him and Jisoo. This made him very uncomfortable. Changhyeon immediately thinks about it. He's sure it was because Han Jisoo always tormented him, and Kim Dae-jun is also not one to speak ill of his elders, although this does not apply to him. Suddenly, he exclaims sharply, raising the spoon upward. That's why he said that his opponent is not Jisoo but Lee Changhyeon. He almost choked when he heard this, despite Dojin's smiling face, mentally turning to him. This was even worse. He just had to agree that it was Han Jisoo. Then Kim Dae-jun addresses him, asking, what about him? What did they ask him? Changhyeon says that the questions were ordinary, like, who will win? Dojin exclaims energetically, pronounced exactly. And what did he tell them? Lee Changhyeon, with his mouth full of food, says that it is obvious that this person will be him. Kim Dae-jun doesn't seem to listen to him at all, but begins to think out loud. It seems he mentioned Yoon or Yoo Hyaju, but Changhyeon is also great. These two are on another level, even among the academy members. Lee Changhyeon immediately clarifies, did he see them? Dojin calmly replies, we can say that they are the aces of the team. It seems like they could play in the pro league without any problems. If he had seen them in action, he would have thought the same. But Changhyeon pronounces his name sharply and coldly, then clarifies, is that what she thought all this time? Does he think they are on a different level compared to him? Kim Dae-jun freezes in confusion and Lee Chang-jeon, taking an empty food tray in his hands, leaves. Finally, noting that if he thinks like this, he will never achieve anything, he had better give up these thoughts. He's going to do some training so Dae-jun can take his time. He, looking up at him with dark blue eyes, quietly says, "What? Fine." As Changhyeon leaves, he thinks with a sigh that maybe he was too cruel to this guy, but he needed to say it. Everyone has more or less the same talent, with a few exceptions. Those who are superior to everyone else are the people who have their eyes firmly set on the top. It makes no sense for him to consider himself less capable than others, especially at his age. Lee Changhyeon was calmly drinking the water he took from the drink machine, when suddenly a hand lands on his shoulder, and he wonders what. Turning around, he sees a guy in a black and white uniform who greets him with a sweet smile and explains that his name is Jin Han. He heard that the guy got into a fight with Hangul in the first stage. How it was did he think he was cool? He constantly trained with him at the academy, and he never managed to defeat him. Looks like the guy gave Yoon Han Zaeol a run for her money. Towards the end, he had never seen anyone their age interact with Hangul. Does he talk too much? What's his name? Lee Changhyeon examines Han with disbelief and asks again. His name? Having introduced himself, he immediately clarifies what he wants. In fact, Yoon Hangul was furious when the survival game began. Hang Yu, who has been standing behind Jin Han all this time, calls out to him and orders him not to talk anything unnecessary. They should go. Then he grabs him by the collar and turns to Changhyeon, asking him to forgive him for this. It's time for them. Kang finally asks him to answer the question next time when the two of them leave. Lee Changhyeon wonders what to say to him. He has no idea what just happened. He heard that they were both from the academy. They seemed to get along well. After activating one of his skills and looking at the two of them, Changhyeon learns that Yoon Hangyo has skills such as sword control at level S and acceleration at level A. His stats state that his strength is 8 and 3, reflex 7 and 3, flexibility 6 and 6, endurance 7 and 6, regeneration 7 and 6. Jin Han's skills state that he has level B plus power. His characteristics indicate that his strength is equal to 9 and 3, reflex is equal to 8 and 3, flexibility is equal to 6 and 3, endurance is equal to 6 and 3, regeneration is equal to 6 and 3. Throw the paper cup in the trash. Lee Changhyeon understands that, since his full bloom is not activated, some of their characteristics exceeded by 50% and in some cases, twice that. He managed to win the survival game thanks to the ether. The next round may not be so easy. The interview, which was filmed earlier, began with footage of the presenter standing on stage, loudly announcing the dream of many for novice hunters who want to become pros hunters. The new generation begins now. Then the frame changes and the process of accepting applications is shown. Judge Min Soo-hyuk, looking at the tablet screen at the application, asks, "Is he from a Seoul private academy?" Judge Jo Era adds that this is one of the top participants. Afterwards, an interview with member Yoon Hang-yeol is shown. The man asked the first question. What difficulties did he encounter on the path to becoming a hunter, and how did he overcome them? Hang-yeol reveals that becoming a hunter has been his dream since childhood. However, it was not easy for him. He failed the Seoul Private Academy's entrance exam twice. No matter what, he did not give up and turned his failures into opportunities. He realized that hard work always pays off, and he also learns to evaluate and improve himself. This is why he firmly believes that perseverance and unwavering determination are the keys to overcome all problems. Lee Changhyeon, holding a glass of water in his hands, approaches Kim Dae-jun, who is sitting on the floor, who is just watching this interview, and asks, "Has it already started?" He confirms it, yes, only he didn't think that he was going on air so quickly. In their days, technology has come a long way. It hasn't been long since the survival game ended. Sitting next to him, Changhyeon wonders what people write. Dae-jun shows him the phone screen and notes that the comments are pretty good. Many people say that Hang Yeo's answers are too dry and boring, but they appreciated his modesty. Suddenly, Lee Changhyeon appears on the screen and the interviewer's voiceover sounds. On the other hand, the next participant chose less traditional answers. Changhyeon immediately points out, "That's right, it's him." The man asks him the exact same question as Yoon Han Jail, but he answered quite directly. Then he is not sure about it, and does not think that he has actually encountered trouble the interior. Then notes that the Hunter League is a team sport. How will he resolve conflicts between himself and team members? Lee Changhyeon answered quite directly. If she left all the decisions to him, then there would be no problems in the next frame. The man asks why they decided to come to Hunters, the next generation. It is divided in half to compare answers. Yoon Hongbul replied that he decided to participate for the purpose of self-improvement and personal growth. Jang Yoon answered completely differently. He thought that there was simply no better candidate than Hin. Then the interviewer asks if anyone seemed a worthy opponent to them. This time, they agreed in their thoughts and confidently answered that for them, there was no such person. The next moment, the screen goes dark, causing Kim Do-jun to start tapping his finger in frustration. But Lee Changhyeon, not at all upset, gets up from his seat and notes that this will be enough. They have to go and train. Dojin, sadly, says, well, no, they didn't even get to the survival game. Changhyeon, heading towards one of the exercise machines, replies that he can watch it later on replay. Kim Do-jun, getting up from the floor, still agrees and wonders if he can ask something. Why does he only pump his legs? Lee Changhyeon, really busy in the gym where he needs to lift the barbell with his legs, says, what does he think his role is? Do-jun guesses ranged fighter. Then Changhyeon asks again, what does he think is most important for ranged fighters? Once again, he is not sure. He answers, huge damage. Lee Chang-in, all this time without ceasing to pump his legs, notes that this is mobility. Perhaps he noticed this in the survival game. But Hongbul and other elite melee fighters either have outstanding mobility or attack which poses a threat to ranged fighters. This is why his mobility should be equal to that of melee players, if not better. After listening to him, Kim Do-jun said, thoughtfully, an interesting point of view. Suddenly someone interrupts them by entering the gym. But contrary to this statement, strategies aimed at destroying long-range fighters are rarely found in the Korean Hunter League. What will he say to this? Changhyeon, looking at the strongly built man with gray hair and beard, wonders who it is. It seems he is no ordinary person. If he has access to this visit, then getting up from the simulator. Lee Changhyeon replies, but if he watches the team play against the British and Ek or the French ALD, he will notice that they primarily favor ranged fighters. In other words, up depends entirely on what kind of ranged fighter one is facing. This is more than enough reason for him to shake his legs. The man grins and coming closer, clarifies so the guy is saying that his skills as a ranged player will make him a priority target for melee fighters. The next moment, the stranger laughed heartily and noted, but the guy is brave. This is very interesting. Afterwards, he frowns sharply and coldly says, excessive self-confidence is one of the main reasons for failure. Before leaving, the man turns around and adds that the guy can consider this advice based on his many years of experience. He will watch him. Then the front door slams, and Kim Do-jun immediately spreads his arms to the sides and asks, what was that? Who is this? Lee Changhyeon, returning to training, says that he also has no idea. But he said that he would watch him, so he thinks that he will prove to this man what he is capable of. In an office decorated in brown and beige tones with dim lighting, the voice of a man in a formal suit is heard. Is something bothering the chairman? The man sitting on the chair slowly turns to him, asking him what he thinks is most important for ranged fighters. The assistant carefully guessed he would say it was support skills and attack power. But in response to this, Lee Jun-teik, the chairman of the Hunters Association, a first-generation hunter, clicked his tongue and declared it was wrong. Then the man tried again the accuracy of the attack. Although there are many important factors for ranged fighters, even the most powerful attack is useless with low accuracy, so it is very important. But Jin-tag, waving his hand, interrupted him. That's enough. He can forget about it. When he closes his eyes, a memory flashes through his head of how many years ago he was sitting next to a young man on the ground wondering why he always trains his legs. He's not going to work with mana. The brown-haired man then replied that the most important thing for a ranged fighter is his legs. But Lee Gentik, looking in surprise at how the guy slapped his thigh, asked what he was talking about. The young man explained. He knows that monsters always attack ranged fighters first, because they know that they are weak in close combat. Don't always have to be on the move after firing. Jintak asked in surprise, is that all? But the brown-haired man objected. What does he mean by this? If the position of a ranged fighter is discovered, then for him, it is certain death. He doesn't understand this, because he fights in close combat. Now, having returned from the memories of the past, he agrees with those words of the young man. This is so ranged fighters need mobility. This can be applied to the Hunter League as well. Of course. But this does not apply to the current line, because most of their best hunters died. But in a high-level league, especially in the world, this is true. then getting up from his seat and heading out of the office. Jintag also notes that this guy hasn't even joined the Hunters League yet, but they are already thinking about the international arena. Frowning and imagining the image of Lee Changhyeon, he wonders if this is his conceit or confidence. Changhyeon, wiping the sweat from his face with a towel, looks at his updated stats, which show that his strength is 5 and 16, reflexes are 6 and 1, flexibility is 6 and 6, endurance is 5 and 66, regeneration is 5 and 6, mana is 5 and 6. When the system window disappears, he notes to himself that his stats are growing faster than in his previous life. It seems to him that this is due to full bloom. This skill seems to have two main features. It gives him talents after completing a certain task, which are essentially completely new skills, and it also significantly increases the growth rate of its characteristics. Considering that the skill greatly increases stats once it is activated, this is truly an incredible skill. Kim De-jun, who at that time was pumping his arms on the exercise machine, saw how he finished the workout, and also stopped and asked what he would do after the workout. Can he give him any advice? Chang-jun looked at him and thought, kindly, Dojin is in good physical shape after training at the academy, so he doesn't need to train as hard. So then he repeats, does he need advice? He knows him well enough to come up with something. Kim De-jun understands and agrees with this, and he really does. Suddenly, a sly smile appears on Lee Changhyeon's face, and he announces, okay, how about a duel with him? They soon arrive at another training hall and arm themselves with swords. Dojin, looking at how Changhyeon examines the blade, is surprised to ask, wait, does he even know how to handle a sword? He notes thoughtfully something like that. Kim De-jun gets into a fighting pose and realizes that he wouldn't have a chance against Lee Changhyeon if he had a gun, but in a sword fight, he won't lose. Changhyeon grins and is the first to attack. Their swords touch, creating sparks. After just a few seconds of this confrontation, Dojo's hands begin to hold. When he notices this, he immediately runs back and wonders what is happening. It's just an ordinary sword, so why is it so hard for him to fight? During this short pause, Lee Changhyeon activates the magic weapon transformation skill and transforms the sword into a spear, while Kim De-jun is it because of their difference in talents. An image of Changhyeon appears on the large screen, a man wearing glasses watching him activate an intelligence skill called the Eye of Analysis. Noting that this guy has good strategic sense, and it was very smart of him to hide 3 knives, not to mention that its stats aren't that high. Lee Min-siak, sitting on the black sofa nearby, grins contentedly, mentally noting that he knew this. A blond man in a blue suit turning to him clarifies he knows something about this guy, right? But Min-suk first asks, in surprise, what? However, the man directly tells him not to play dumb. What skills does this guy have? There was no way he could have pulled off this strategy if he didn't know about his opponent's telekinesis. He seems to have something similar to the Eye of Analysis, like they or the first-generation hunter. Kim Sung-wook. The Eye of Analysis is an extremely useful and rare skill that only 2 people are known to possess. Didn't Lee Min-suk put too much hope on this guy just because he predicted his opponent's skill? He replies that, if anything, he feels like they may be underestimating this member. The guy knew about the location of the hidden dungeon in the survival game, and at the qualifying stage, he only aimed at the clone chips. If he debuts in the first division, it seems people would say that he is the reincarnation of Sung-wook, the very legend. After smiling, Min-sik, turning to the man, clarifies, well, didn't he want to take him in note? In fact, this is so after he thinks about it. His Eye of Analysis can see people's characteristics, but not their skills. But this guy, Chang Jae-un, knew about his opponent's telekinesis, and came up with a strategy to defeat him. All this time he was in the training room with Kim Do-jin surpassing him in skills. The man turns to Lee Min-sik, clarifying they have already decided which team will this guy be on. He smiled again and asked what he must have really liked this privateer. It's a shame, because the teams that the show sponsors have priority in the selection. These words are the look of the blonde, but he just grits his teeth, and thinks to himself that he must find a way to get this guy for himself. The weapons finally stop, and Lee Changhyeon falls to the floor, and at the same time, thinks he doesn't know. He simply does not understand that full bloom is considered a special achievement, but he is in no hurry to figure it out. At this time, Kim De-jun makes a couple of lunges forward, waving his sword in the air, and finally, catching his breath, announces that now it seems to him that he can win. But Changhyeon walks by casually, answering he shouldn't say something stupid. Dejun tries to insist. Come on, he's gotten a lot better, hasn't he? His mastery of the sword has never been so polished. Lee Changhyeon, hearing this, mentally, agrees he really became stronger after following his advice. But he still doesn't stand a chance against him. Thinking about this, he leaves the training room and goes along the corridor. Kim Dejun, although surprised by this, still runs out after him. In one of the classrooms, there are video cameras on everywhere, and the office is filled with many students. Finally, the door opens and Changhyeon enters the office with a serious expression on his face, wondering, I wonder why they were called here. Are they really going to teach them something? Finally, 3 judges come in, and Jong-era takes a seat at the podium and greets everyone. How was their week break? Or should she say, their week of training? For some of them, it may have been quite fruitful while, for others, not so much, but be that as it may, it seems to her that they still have a lot to learn. Lee Min-suk continues. Each of them is a budding talent with great potential, but there is still a significant gap between them and professional hunters. Therefore they assembled a team of mentors for them. Then 2 men and 1 woman enter the office. And Min-sik continues. Each of the 3 people presented in front of them competed in the ranks of the first division and could boast of victorious or other achievements that are equally worthy of attention. They will be responsible for both coaching and evaluating their performance. Mentors will train them to perform their assigned roles, and their performance in said roles will be evaluated in a less than 3-on-3 Hunter League format. Lee Changhyeon, listening to them, wonders manipulation of mana. This is enough to put pressure on everyone here. It's not that the first to speak is a tall man in a white shirt and gray trousers with a menacing expression on his face. His name is Lee Song-jin. He will train melee fighters. He has no patience with the text who does not show fortitude or is willfully ignorant. But most of all, he hates self-confident assholes. They must remain humble and take their lessons seriously. Era, picking up a tablet, notes that after evaluating their performance in the qualifying stage, the survival game and the past week, they have assigned roles to each of them. As soon as she names them, the students must approach their mentors. Lee Changhyeon will go first. He immediately rises from his seat, and Jong-era announces close combat. This makes him freeze in place and fall into a stupor. The only thing he says is to ask again. What? Soon, in a spacious room, the walls and floor of which are covered with concrete tiles, there are students, some standing alone, others gathered in pairs or small groups. Changhyeon, being among them, is still perplexed. How could he be put in close combat? Then he looks around and mentally adds Yun Hangyo. You hide you in Dojin. This group is full of promising people. Finally, Sungjin appears in front of them, who immediately shouts. They must forget everything they were taught before. He doesn't care which academy they come from, because each of them is weaker than the hunters of the 3rd division. As they may have noticed during a Hunter League match, all hunters use mana-activated mobility skills or gadgets such as air anchor and air step. They fight each other on the ground, but even 3rd division players are skilled in air combat. Lee Changhyeon notes to himself that these devices activated by mana allow hunters to participate in more dynamic and spectacular battles. Lee Sun-jin continues he will teach them how to use the air anchor and air step. He doesn't need melee hunters who don't know how to use them, and now they can get started. Soon, a white, glowing cord wraps around the leg of one of the guys who screams, finding himself suspended upside down. Changhyeon, seeing the steps on the translucent platform in the air that appears under his foot, and thinks they are definitely difficult to use. For the first time, previously, he could use these skills as if they were part of his body. Now he will see if the muscle memory is preserved. Suddenly, he is attracted by some noise, and when he looks to the side, he sees Lee Sun-jin bending over one of the guys lying on the floor, shouting that the idiots are destined to become the rising stars of the Korean Hunter League, and that's all they can do. He must get up now. After that, he raises his head up and, turning to the guy who was hanging in the air all this time, adds that the 3rd Division League is not for nothing, known as the graveyard of newcomers. It's the perfect trap for poor fools like him. Some don't even know how to use an air anchor or step. Lee Changhyeon looks at him and only thinks about how loud he is. He can barely concentrate. He then looks away to see Kim Dejun stuck in the air, with one foot on a translucent platform while his right arm is wrapped in an air anchor. Changhyeon makes a mental note that he seems to have problems too. However, this is to be expected. They were given no instructions at all. Afterwards, he waves to Dojin and shouts at him, telling him to come down. He's doing it wrong. He looks down in surprise and immediately jumps off, looking at Lee Changhyeon with his arms crossed. He wonders if he's going to practice. The coach said he was going to test them on this, but Changhyeon replies rather coldly. He should worry about himself. Does he think he will succeed at this rate? Kim Do-jun is sincerely interested. Then, what does he want him to do? Lee Changyen, after activating the air anchor and wrapping it around his right hand, explains that he must first decide on the length of the mono rope, then maintain a constant flow of it. Otherwise, the length of the rope will constantly change. Therefore, he will not be able to maintain balance. He must also concentrate on his center of gravity. When he is in the air, his body should serve as the center of gravity. Then Changhyeon unwinds the luminous rope in his hands and throws up the anchor, which seems to get stuck in the air. After that, jumping and spinning in the air all the while holding onto the rope, he lands on firm feet and marks like this. This makes it much easier to prevent a fall or move the body. And he must always remember about mana. He must concentrate on maintaining a constant flow of it. Dojin watched his every move all this time and tried to remember every word. Finally, he also creates a rope and repeats what he heard. Yes, he needs to use the body as a center of gravity and control the flow of mana. Having created an anchor, he throws it in the air, and the first time he manages to leave it there, pulling the rope to test its strength. Kim Do-jun suddenly grabs it and also spins in a jump landing. Neatly, turning around, he exclaimed enthusiastically. Did Changhyeon see this? He got it right the first time. He definitely has talent. He shows no joy, just calmly answers. Of course, they are abruptly called out by Sunjun, who is indignant. What kind of talk is this? They came here to have fun, right? Pointing his hand at Lee Changhyeon, he adds these others can't handle anything. What's his name? Changhyeon says his name, and at the same time wonders if the coach is trying to rein them in. Well, he doesn't care. Lee Sung-jun frowns and grinds his teeth, noting okay. It looks like he just stood there and did nothing because he was confident in his abilities, right? Lee Chung-yoon replies with complete confidence that it seems so. At the same time, he understands that he can retreat, but he is curious how they were going to test them with an air anchor and a step. In addition, if we take into account his past life, then technically he is older, and it is the duty of the elders to educate their younger comrades. Sungjin finally turns away from them and announces that he thinks he's given them enough time. Then they should start the test. They must get ready. Lee Min-suk's voice is heard in the office. Wait. Why is his name on the list? His finger stops on the tablet screen where the list of participants in the lower battle is presented. Jong Era, also looking at the names and surnames of the participants, clarifies about whom. About Lee Changhyeon. He even standing up in surprise confirms this. Yes. Did he expect to be assigned to a group of ranged fighters? Was she wrong? Era explains that she thought it would be a good idea to assign him there, since he is skilled with close combat weapons, but more importantly, he is too selfish. Therefore she assigned him to the close combat team under the leadership of Lee Seongjin. Min-sik then points out, now he wants to be clear. Her plan is to piss off the rookie by pitting him against the first division hunters. She not wanting to directly answer this question, says, what's done is done. Moreover, since learning is one of the key goals of this program, she believes that everything is in order. But at the same time, Jong Era notes to himself that it is necessary to bring arrogant newcomers down to earth. Sungjin, having gathered all the students, explains that the test is to reach the air anchor up there. Well, they can start, by the way, and he hopes that the participant who felt confident enough to mess around will show what he is capable of, because otherwise he does not deserve to become a hunter. Changhyeon, to whom these words were addressed, does not outwardly react to the challenge, but mentally grins. Is he trying to get rid of it with this test? Afterwards, with even more confidence, he answers, of course, but what will the coach do if he succeeds? Lee Sung-jin immediately promises that he will give him absolute freedom to do whatever he wants in his classes, only if he succeeds. But in fact, he understands that this is impossible. This text is hundreds of meters above the floor. This height is not accessible to those who are using the anchor for the first time. Even intermediate users cannot do this. Looking at those students who tried to complete the task and got stuck in the air, Sungjin wonders what he was saying. Suddenly, a sword flies past him, and he is confused and thinks what? Seeing Yun Hangyo flying through the air while standing on the blade of a weapon. Lee Sung-jin notes to himself that this is interesting. He uses the sword to fly. Is this telekinesis? No, it's something more powerful. It's a pity he doesn't use an air anchor, but maybe he can get higher. The next moment, enthusiastic exclamations from students are heard nearby. It can't be. Sung-jun glances to the side, and in the next moment, they reflect extreme surprise, looking at how Lee Changhyeon, clutching the rope with his hands, rests one foot on the translucent blue platform. He wonders, what is this? Changhyeon grins and jumps up the wall holding onto the rope. Lee Sungjin, watching him, wonders, isn't he afraid of falling? But he just continues to create new platforms and build on them. Sungjin, watching this, understands that it can't be. It's an air step. Seeing Lee Changhyeon flip over in the air, he completely thinks that this guy is falling. But Changhyeon purses his lips and concentrating, grabs the air anchor and flipping again in the air, stands with one foot on the balloon, and then runs up the wall, finally grabbing the target secured there by Lee Sungjin, and takes it off the loop. Under his confused look, he sighs and adds, "It's pretty cool here." Sungjin is so surprised by what happened that he opens his mouth and asks the question, "What is this? How did he do it?" This is his first time using these devices. This is impossible. Shortly after this class, during the lecture, Lee Sungjin clears his throat and announces that they must now return to his explanation. There are two main roles in close combat. The first role is the initiators, whose task is to start the battle and defeat the opponents. They typically have special skills that allow them to assist allies in close combat and immobilize opponents. Lee Changhyeon, sitting at his desk in his office, puts his hands behind his head and yawns, thinking this is a boring theory after practice, right? Sungjin continues. The second role is melee fighters, a role he believes everyone is familiar with. Changhyeon suddenly lies down on the desk, resting his head on his hands, and realizes that it's great that the coach won't be able to tell him anything. Although he sees this, he still continues. The task of melee fighters is to enter the fight after the initiator, focusing on the enemy, or key fighters. If they go into more detail, there is a lot more, but for now, that's all they need to know. Lee Changhyeon is also lost in his thoughts and wonders. Well, what else could he do? He just needed to win the argument. He spent years in the Hunter League before him. It was as easy as shelling pears. But anyway, when did that note end up in his pocket? He recalls how he suddenly felt a piece of paper in his jacket pocket, and unfolded it to see that a proposal for a meeting was written there. He should come after class, during the break, to the backyard, 7 o'clock from the training center. They want to show him something interesting. Changhyeon wonders who this is from. What does this person want? Looks like he should go and check it out. When the class ends, he crumpling this sheet of paper in his hand, comes to the indicated place, but looking around, he wonders, what, nobody here? Is this some kind of joke? But then Lee Changhyeon notices something below and thinks, what is it? Having activated the all-seeing eye, he sees a faint glow above the ground and understands that something is wrong here. Crouching, he notices that a large square has been drawn on the sand, which, in the next moment, turns into a door, and moving to the side, it opens a passage down. Changhyeon, looking at the black steps and tiled walls, wonders, what is this? Touching the wall, he goes down, still wondering, is this a secret area? But soon he stops abruptly looking ahead, when he sees a large silhouette. When Lee Changhyeon takes a closer look, it turns out to be Lee Jin-taek, and he remembers, if you believe the internet, then this is the chairman of the Hunters Association. In Jin-taek, turning to face him, notes that he has found a way to get here. Changhyeon, once in a spacious room, spreads his arms to the sides, answering that his note was useless. 7 hours from the training center. How can anyone even get here with this? At the same time, he assumes that the chairman must have been testing him to see if he would find his way. Lee Changhyeon then adds that he hopes that he will at least say why he called him here. Lee Young-taek explains that he watched all the moments of his participation. Well, only one episode has aired so far. Then he suddenly thinks, of course, this is not all he knows about this guy. He had seen him train where he demonstrated incredible mobility and observation. He interested him. Finally, Jin-taek notes that he has decided that he will try to guess who will win this show. Changhyeon, still not quite understanding what was happening, suggests and the chairman thought that he would be the winner. Lee Jin-taek, raising his left index finger up, agrees. Of course, not only that, he is confident that the guy will make it to the first division and perhaps even higher. Then Lee Changhyeon once again crumpled the note in his hand, and noted, okay, so what did the chairman want to show him? He said that he had something interesting here. Turning to the podium behind Jin-taek confirmed this exactly. Yes, he really said that. Then he scans his handprint on a special computer, and the curtains on the side wall part to the sides, revealing to them a view of a stand filled with various weapons, and shiny pendants, earrings and bracelets. Changhyeon, seeing this, immediately understands that this is an S-rank weapon and specialized equipment for mana. Turning to Lee Jin-taek, he wonders why the chairman is showing him all this. He looking at all the objects, clarifies, doesn't the guy want this? Pursing his lips, Lee Changhyeon thinks, of course he wants this. He even sees the weapon he used in his previous life. Reborn. It is an incredible sword that he was allowed to use in an exhibition match as a prize for winning the match. It was extremely pleasant for him to use this sword. It was also special when it was turned into a gun. Suddenly, Jintik announces that he can lend him one of these weapons if he wants. Changhyeon asks, should I borrow it? Can't the chairman just give it to him? Lee Jun-teik explains that he would understand if he knew the cost of these weapons. It is much more valuable than the weapon he will receive from the Morris workshop. Lee Changhyeon sighs and agrees. Okay, after all, it's just a weapon. They better stop beating around the bush. What does the chairman want from him? Jintik laughs and realizes that people tend to try to please him when they find out that he is a first-generation hunter and the chairman of the Hunters Association. But this guy looks down on him. You don't see this every day. Afterwards, he directly announces that Changhyeon must join the Hunters Association, but not as an employee, but as a hunter. If he joins, he will be allowed to borrow any of the weapons presented here. Lee Changhyeon clarifies, and what will he get from this? Lee Young-tik wonders if he doesn't know what it means to join the Hunters Association. He replies that, of course he knows, but he does not understand what benefit this has for him. If that's all the chairman can offer him, then he leaves. The next lesson will start soon. Jintag falls into a stupor at such a statement, but almost immediately tries to stop him, saying that it seems to him that the guy may be overestimating his abilities. Does he know how many young talents he has seen who excelled in the second and third divisions, but failed to progress further? Stopping Changhyeon honestly answers no, and he's not interested. Looking over his shoulder, he adds that the only thing that matters to him is whether he can do it or not. He appreciates the old man showing him all this. They will see each other again. Having finished this, Lee Changhyeon continues on his way and climbs the stairs. Lee Jin-tik, looking after him, sighs heavily, admiring these words and deeds.